we put hard facing material, and this time we were using Coleman number 4. And we go to the grinder afterwards and, oh, we put too much on this side and not enough on this side. It's going back to the welder and back and forth. Boy, this is taking a long time. We need a gauge line to know how much hard facing to put on and where to put it on. So why don't we take the stock cam, iron cam, we'll put the new profile on. Within the original profile, we put a higher lift, longer duration cam by reducing the base circle down. In later years, we got new castings, of course, but right now we're using the old stock cam. And we got the new profile on there now, and we went over and we put a groove down the middle and down halfway down the flank. And now we knew exactly how much hard facing to put on there. We didn't have full width hard facing, but that was enough. And by golly, now we could make about 8 a day. And believe it or not, the factory wanted to go racing. Now Ford and Chevrolet and Chrysler are competing. And Hot Rod Magazine, sometimes they'll send an engine to Hot Rod Magazine or direct to Big Kettle Rock. Hop this up and make an intake manifold for it, and the cam, whatever you want to do, let's get it in the magazine and get some publicity. So Edelbrock would invite cam runners on each of these hop-up deals, and he'd make the intake manifold. Well, there's a small block Chevy, and everybody can, and we're gonna, when whoever wins, wins. But when they got through with all the tests, they liked my cam the best, but on the Chevy, but we're not gonna say what cam was in there. I was a little disappointed at first, but that made it all the more mysterious, and they had to find out what cam that was that made this Chevy produce, maybe 250 horsepower at first, yeah. So, and then the wide block Ford came out with that 1/2-inch stem and mushroom tappets. Wow, now they couldn't put a roller in that one. Although they did later, and I'll show you why. I'll tell you about that later. So by God, we started hard facing that and putting in a special chiller and lifter. And made good power. And by golly, now Ford already had a kit, hop-up kit, made by old man Sullivan, who was the factory engineer, which included the cam, tappets, and push rods, and valve springs, and so forth. But Mercury wanted their own, and they had to make it, the Mercury kit. So I had to make about 8 of those a day until we got 500 were in the stock. It had to be a legal factory part. 500 had to be produced and available to the public. And they went to Daytona Beach to set some records and so forth. And so let's see what else happened. Oh, Fran Hernandez was a hot rod guy, and he was a dry lace racer. By God, he got a job with Mercury. And he says, you know, on the dyno where there at Vic's, we're only going to turn it 5,500 down this wide block Ford. So why don't we take out that inner spring in there and just run the outer spring only, because that does good up to 5,500. I said, yeah, but this will give you a little extra in case you want to rev it a little tighter. No, we don't need it. The kit will come with the outer spring only, with a damper coil in it, of course. Okay. Well, it took years later when I talked to Gus Davis, who was a top engine man at Holman Moody, running those wide lock boards. He said we were racing all over the Carolinas, and those lifters were breaking off. We hit a chuck hole, and that engine revved up out of sight. We were breaking off lifters, and I had to work all night at the motel getting it ready for the next race. So I found out, it came 10 or 15 years later, I found out that a Pontiac had an inner spring that I could put inside there and stopped all that trouble when I overread. Hey, that was in the kit originally, and Fran Hernandez made me take it out. I'll be doggone, so that's kind of comical. So it was necessary in case they overread. So that was one thing. All right, now we're going to have to go into roller tapping. Chet Herbert was first at that, and I don't think he could make more than one a day, one a week, or one or two a week maybe. And I said, and now the engine is not made for roller tapping, so you've got to keep. So Chet Herbert made a long bar, we bolt in, and then you put a bony slice on the tappets, and that keeps them from rotating. So that was quite a bit of work to put a roller cam in an engine that had originally flat tappets. So I said, you know, maybe we can make, maybe if we extend the length of the tappet up out of the boss, and we link across one intake and exhaust, maybe one will guide the other. So we made some little devices, and the bicycle chain worked pretty good. A piece of bicycle chain between two lifters, and that worked good. And finally my toolmaker come up with this fork and blade deal. And so I called the patent attorney, we want to patent this. And I forgot to tell him about the bicycle chain and various other makers. And so he patented only that way, a fork and blade that kept from turning. So people that want to make a self-guiding roller tappets couldn't use that method, but they could beam up a different method. So by golly, McGirt started making cams later on, and I used to consult with him a long time, because he used to run in Indianapolis back in 1934 or 5, I think it was, and cracked up there, in fact. And you know, he came up with 2 spools and a wrench across. The 2 looked like 2 little spools. And by golly, he had that working pretty good. And he didn't patent that, and that's the method everybody uses today. Well, later on he retired and sold me a lot of his stuff. I said, Frank, you know, I like your system better than mine. You had to get around my patent, and you came with those 2, and I like that. And that's the system everybody uses today, and it's not patented because McGirt didn't patent that method. So we all use that today. Let's see now. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Maybe you got a question about something on publicity stunts or something. You want to hear about any of those? Well, here I'll talk about publicity stunts. One time, Scotty Penn was a pretty good fabricator. He even had a speed shop, and he claims he taught Jocko how to port heads. That's what he told me. Jocko was pretty famous for porting heads, and he says that he worked for me and I taught him how to do that. And I don't know if it's true. Anyway, Iskey says, why don't you make a 5-cycle cam? I said, wow, that sounds good. You know, I heard of a washing machine that had 5 cycles, but I never associated with the engine. I said, wow, I said, boy, that'd be a hell of a, how could I substantiate, if I ever come with a 5-cycle cam, they'd laugh at me because it takes compression power, exhaust. How am I going to fit in that extra cycle? I said, well, the cams are getting longer today. How about that overlap period? We're now depending on the overlap period because our powers are a lot higher than it used to be, and the temperature a lot higher than it used to be, and we needed the overlap cycle to cool the engine and flush fuel and air across that combustion chamber and out the exhaust, wasting fuel, of course, to keep the temperatures down. So that's it. It's the overlap period. All right. And by golly, we hold back on until the right time. And the right time came when these fellows went to the NHRA Nationals with a supercharged car and one with the aspirated car. That was, gosh, I'll think of it later. By the way, Howard made fun of my 5-cycle cam. He put a picture of 5 bicycles in a row, racing bikes, streamlined guy with hogs. But the 5th guy was a Bloom tire bike and a Dutch cap and a clown on there. That was to make fun of Whiskey's 5-cycle. No such thing. So then, when they won the Nationals, I made an ad, 5-cycle won the Nationals, and they won a brand new pickup. So I called Pete Millard, the cartoonist, said, make me a cartoon. I want this brand new Chevy pickup, and a clown has got his head out the window with a Dutch cap on, and he's holding the big trophy. And in the back of the pickup is a bicycle, and then it's pulling a trailer, and that's all it has to say. So that was my answer to Howard Johansson. So later on, Scotty gives me another idea. It's a joke, but we had some fun with it. Overlapping the overlap. So he said, Liskey, here's your 2 lobes. Why don't you put an extra little lobe in there? Ha ha ha. Yeah. Hey. Boy, that would attract a lot of attention. Kind of make me look smart. What is it? Where can I put that lobe? Extra little lobe. It'll have to be the intake or the exhaust that gets bumped open an extra time. Only a 1/16 of an inch or so. Where can I do that without hurting anything? I don't want to spoil everything. I've got to sneak it in there where it doesn't do any good, but it's in there. So I decided that if I put it at bottom dead center on the exhaust stroke, maybe the exhaust is all gone at bottom dead center, and there's a dwell down there, and the piston doesn't rise too much for 30 or more degrees. Maybe I could crack the intake valve open a 1/16 of an inch and close it again, and then open up near the top at the normal time, maybe 40 degrees before top center. So I called the patent attorney, the same one, no, this is a different one. This is a different patent attorney. And he says, oh, that won't work. Well, I don't care if it works or not, I just want a patent that maybe it's worth working on in the future. And no, that won't work. I said, what if I make it run on the dyno? Oh, all right, do that. So we take a stock Chevy hydraulic cam, we call it 260, a mild cam, for the street hopped up from the stock cam. And we put the extra little bump on there, down there bottom center. I'm hoping the exhaust is all gone from high pressure at that, down there bottom dead center. And we run it with and without the bump. He says, well, I can see 1 or 2 horsepower plus or minus. I don't think you got anything. Well, I thought you were going to give me the patent now that I got it running. It isn't hurting anything. It isn't really hurting anything. That's the amazing thing. You wouldn't give me the patent. I heard that you can patent all kinds of stuff that don't even work. And I think that is true. Anyway, I decided I'll make it public domain. Maybe somebody else will get it working if I don't get it working. And we put it in the paper, a picture of it with the 2 lobes and the extra little bump lobe. And some of the engine builders asked questions about it and got interested, and then finally we made a few and we quit selling them. 20 years went by, and a guy named Jim Fueling, who was had a lot of ideas about cams and engines and stuff. He even made a little inroads with the factory engineers. I think he got some money out of them to do experimental work. He called me up one day, and this is 20 years later, and it's already public domain. It's been out in the public. No one's fooling with it. So I want you to make me a pulse cam. He's got a different name for it. I call it a 3D cam. He calls it a pulse cam. I want you to make me this cam like this. I said, oh, yeah, I made those before. In fact, I tried to patent. Oh, well, I got the patent. How'd you get the patent? I don't know, but I got it. I said, I'll tell you what. I'll make it for you free, because maybe we can get this working someday. Oh, Iskey, you don't understand. All the campgrounds are going to have to pay me royalties on this because of my patent. I said, wait a minute. I think I got you shot down. I made it public domain. In fact, I'm going to mail you the ad that appeared in the magazine. And I did, and never heard from him again. Well, by golly, he didn't have the nerve to tell me that in his patent, your name is mentioned. Iskenderian tried this and couldn't make it work, but I made it work. And he didn't really. So then the story still goes on now. I go to visit Jack Engel over in Santa Monica. He's a good friend, built his own cam grinder, and I like the cam grinders that built their own machine. You know, because they're a little more handy and more mechanical type guys. And he tells me, hey, he says, I'm making those pulse cams for fueling, you know. You are? Oh, I can see. He's an inventor when he comes here. But not in my place, he can't say he's an inventor. I says, hey, let's face it, they don't work right. Well, he does admit it's cosmetic. Oh, so cosmetic. I should have thought of that. Cosmetic, man. You know, you can sell stuff that's cosmetic. Doesn't do any good, but it's cosmetic. Okay. So I learned that name. I should have thought of that name myself. Yeah. So in a way, sometimes cams can be cosmetic, with a little fancy frills thrown in, you know. So that was the end of that, finally. Well, that poor fellow passed away, but he did have a lot of ideas and about theories and stuff. Well, can you guys think of anything? Oh, yeah.
Polydyne.
Polydyne, oh yeah. Well, we heard that back here in Detroit, one of the engineers came up with a Polydyne formula for figuring cams. And what he was doing was taking into consideration the elasticity in a push rod and a rock rhyme. That stuff is not exactly rigid, so there's some flex in it. So his formula would compensate for that, for those, the fact that nothing was rigid and stayed, didn't flex, you might say. So I said, well, let's call our cams Polydyne. And my artist said, let me think of a logo for you. He put a poly that's dying with a cloth, with a napkin, and he made that sign from him. Now Chet Herbert, Clay Smith already had the woodpecker, so that was our new deal to complete with the woodpecker. So it was a dining poly parrot. Later on, Crane said, "Oh, you don't really have a poly." Well, he was right. We didn't, but we were using that name and didn't get in any trouble, as far as I know. So, so that was that, the Polydyne, yeah. So, oh yeah. Now, Edelbrock's dyno. He let us run on his dyno once in a while. And later on, he bought a government surplus dyno. How does the government have surplus dynos? By golly, here's the reason they give. And you can bid on them and get them pretty cheap sometimes. They paid a lot of money. Do you know that I think it's hard to get away with now. The factories know too much about cleaning the air and all that, but 40 or 50 years ago, you could petition the government and says, I'm coming out with an electric car or a gasoline car that's going to clean the air and get terrific mileage and all that and everything, and you'll get nowhere. They won't give you any money, but they do have money available. Why don't we have money available for some of our inventive people in our country? We'll give them a chance to make their inventions work. Well, you don't get anywhere. But if you'll pay $10,000 to this certain company who knows how to write it up, the money will probably come in. Maybe $1 million or $2 million or $2. And you'll need a dynamometer, and you'll need this, that, and you'll spend all this money. And then afterwards you get all through and nothing comes from it. We got to sell it down, give the money, dynamometer back to the government, and they'll put it on bid. And that's how Edelbrock got this big dyno pretty reasonable. He sold us the old dyno for $1,500. Oh, we were tickled to get it. But right away back in Buffalo, New York was Ted Kessler, one of our good customers. He wanted it bad. I said, by golly, you're a good customer, I know, but I'll tell you what. We're having a big auction at a big engine company in Oakland, California called Scott Motors. They've been building beautiful truck engines and all kinds of stuff for many years. And the brochure shows all the machinery that's for sale. And there's 20 dynamometers on the list. We're bound to get some, buy one or two cheap. So if we get a good deal up there, we might actually have big dyno. So By golly, they come back with two at $700 a piece. And so we let it hit because we needed more horsepower anyway. It was a little bit low on horsepower capacity. So we started setting them up. Breeze and Mallard had a speed shop, and they broke up, and Mallard's on his own now, and he says, let me come and run that dyno for you. I said, well, that'd be a good idea. You come in here, let's set it up. And we started setting it up. And it says on there 4,500 maximum RPM, and they must have run it at twice that speed to make sure it's safe at 4,500. Well, the rotors were a little bit old and loose on the shaft. We had to hard chrome the shaft and rebore them and refit the rotors. It had 3 rotors inside and 3 valves on top, and we rigged up a gearbox so we didn't have to sand over to turn them. We could load and unload the dyno with a wheel here. Well, it's all old-fashioned stuff, but it sure did the job. And then we had a customer named Bones Below who's running gas at Lions Drag Strip. He's a machinist at the aircraft factory. And he's racing all over, building his own engine. And he comes to the front office to see about anything new. And he hears it running and roaring back there like a drag strip. It sounds like the drag strip, that money engine running at maybe 4,000, 5,000 RPM. So he goes around the back and he waits until the motor shuts off because it's making a lot of noise. That attracted him there. Hey, does that man get paid for doing that? I would do that free. And I said, oh, I like your attitude. Well, he's already an engine man and running at the drag strip. It was a godsend. I said, you know, Joe Mallard is leaving us. He's going to go to IBM to be an instructor on something. And why don't you work under him and pretty soon, and then you'll be the dyno man when he leaves. And by that, it worked out beautiful. And of course, one of the questions he asked, now, just what do I do here? I said, do anything you want. We're just trying to make horsepower, we're open-minded, and try anything you want. So that helped. That was a good idea. And so pretty soon we're making good horsepower. And even with our old-fashioned cams, which are a series of radiuses, we're making about 1.1 horsepower per cubic inch out of a small block Chevy. It's a 283 Corvette engine, short block, which you buy for $400. The head is a double humped head, iron head. Best one they've got. And are we going to port the head? No, if we do, it'll interfere with our cam. But it'll interfere with the cam. So if we're going to do any porting on the cylinder heads, why, we'll do that later after we get all through with cam testing. So we leave the head, the ports absolutely alone, and the valves alone, no streamlining of the valves. We do put on dual valve springs, machined it for dual valve springs. Rocker arms. There's no rocker arms available. Just the slip and slide rocker arms. That's what we call them, the slip and slide rocker arms. We had to elongate the slot for the higher lift. They're still stud-mounted rocker arms. And we were making 1.1 horsepower per cubic inch with the old-fashioned cams. Now, Winfield was known for the soft-action cams, but all of his profiles were lower lift. And of course, he had that one that became the Duntop cam and was very famous. So now, oh yeah. Now a flat tablet profile. If you look at it, we have to look at a chicken egg, and you know that does look like, that big end looks like the base circle, and gee, it looks nice and smooth over the nose and all that. I wonder if, let's prop that out and see what my God, that looks like it's got more lip than we're used to. We're afraid of that much lip. And the duration is long and soft and smooth. Let's make a cam like that. With very little alteration, we make that cam and make it a heart face. Bones, I want you to try this. Now we got a 327 now. That's also $400, a real bargain. It's high silicon pistons that are close fitted. Forged pistons and stuff, stock rods and stuff. We're gonna put that, so, Bones, I don't think this is gonna work, but let's make sure it's no good. And after 2 hours, he's got it in there and he comes up to run out of, we just jumped 75 horsepower in that one jump without even touching the carburation. The carburation, the Venturis and the carburation, since the extra airflow and I feed in the more fuel, it just worked perfect. My God, we're 5 years ahead of the market. No one will believe it. McGurk didn't believe it. He had his own dyno on what I can't remember now. He says, oh, that's a bunch of bull you got in your advertising about 8,009 and 8,500 RPM. Why anybody? Why, you don't believe it? No. Chevy, small box Chevy's all done at 5,000. Oh, Frank, this is high lift. Oh, I've already tried high lift. I said, you must have tried fast action high lift and you're bouncing the valve. It sounds like the engine's running out of power, but it's the valves are bouncing. So he wouldn't believe it. Now, Mickey Thompson didn't believe it. I'd go fishing and I'd stop at Mickey Thompson after fishing at the half-day boat, and he didn't believe it. I said, I see that you've got your own dyno here. Chevrolet must have furnished that for you. I said, why don't we bring our engine over and run on your dyno? And okay, do that. Bones got it ready, and the pickup and brought it over, bit right up on his dyno, and Mickey, he had the throttle and he takes it, I think he took it to 6 and was scared to go any faster. I don't want to be responsible for blowing it up. No. So Bones get on the throttle and he took it up to about 7,500 or so. Well, I believe you, but you got that engine tricked up. Tricked up? What do you mean tricked up? It's a stock Corvette short block down below, and the best head with no porting, the double hump head, dual springs on there and stuff, and stock rockers, elongated slot. I said, here, take the pan off and let Mickey look under there. And he wouldn't look, but he said his man to look. He says, yeah, it's stock. It's stock rods and pistons. By the way, and so, and I went away not knowing, what is he using here? He's getting ready to go to Indianapolis with his Chevy. And he wouldn't tell us what he's using, what he's experimenting with. Well, believe it or not, so we finally found out what he was using. Quarter-speed cam. Bus Shelter in Turlock, California, had come up with this idea, why not run the cam at quarter speed instead of half speed? Which means he has to have 2 lobes on the cam, where there was only one, and they have to look like little tiny, little I wouldn't call them peanuts, but they're 2 little sharp-looking cams with hollow plank. They have to be ground with a 4-inch wheel with a hollow plank re-entrance, we call it, to get the fastest possible action, because he's turning so slow, the action is too slow, so he's got to speed up the action. And even when he does, it's still soft, slow action. So that's why he had gotten onto that cam, and he never had tried one of mine, I think he had never tried. So, and I believe he took that to Indianapolis, as far as I know. And that was the quarter-speed cam. Bus Scheller originally had it on his Harley twin motorcycle at Bonneville. So it works, but it's just a harder way to do it. The half-speed is more common. By the way, on regular aircraft engines with a big plate cam, sometimes they have 8-speed cams and 6-speed cam, 1 6-speed cam, and all kinds of weird deals work out good there on those engines. Well, let's see. Oh yeah. Any more about publicity stunts?
The eggs you use for inspiration really great.
What?
What type of great egg you use for inspiration?
Installation, would you say?
No, so I was just using the eggs that you had used for the inspiration of that camp program. I was just joking, I'm looking at the eggs.
No, I tell you, can you come up over there? I can't hear that right here.
Okay.
You tell me.
So the eggs that you use for the inspiration of the camp program. I was just joking, I'm looking at the eggs.
How did we come up with the profiles?
For the egg that you used.
Oh, yeah. What about that?
What type of egg was it?
Just a regular chicken egg. And we went through a few of them, and we found this one might work. Yeah. But well, you know, maybe when you have to go through a small opening, you go through with a ball, and you made it smaller than a ball on the big end, and maybe that's the right way to go. You can get the biggest thing to a small opening. But anyway, but that put us on the right track. Oh yeah. No one would believe this extra horsepower. Engine builders. Some engine builders, and good ones too, are afraid of RPM. Afraid of why they've had bad luck in some cases. One of them was Traco, who had a fine reputation. One time, me and McGirt decided to go and visit Traco. We knew that they're good friends and grew up together with Jack Engel in Santa Monica. They're from that location. And Jim Travers and Frank Kuhn. Jim Travers said, "Hey Frank, you're into sprint cars pretty heavy with those Chevys." Small block Chevys running against Offies in the old days. I'm pretty sure it was all Chevy. Have you got a drawing that any better than you got anything that is better than Jack Engel's number 80? Yeah, I think so. Hey, why don't you bring one over and let us try it out? And McGurk's pretty wise. He said, "What for? You wouldn't buy them anyway. If it worked, he'd show it to Jack, and Jack would copy it, you figure." And he was right. Later years, they're now Jim Travers has retired and gone to the Four Corners, Utah, and it just let's see, it was Jim Traco. The other partner was Jim Travers and Frank Kuhn. Frank Kuhn is running the shop by himself now, And he's running he's got an FE Ford on the dyno. Now that's got the high ratio rockers, 1.7 or 8 to 1. He says, we can't get 6,000 RPM out of this engine. Oh, is that right? Well, you're probably using the 1.5 ratio profiles on there. And you're probably closing the valves. You want to go past 6,000 RPM? Yeah. I says, I'll make the camera go past 6,000 RPM. It was very simple. I just divided 1.8 into 1.5, and all my lift figures came down about 80%, and I made a new cam and a flat 1.5 to 1 ratio cam and we already had good success with, and stretched the timer a few 10 or more degrees and took it over there. He said he wanted more RPM. That's all he said. Bad mistake. I knew that they would bring Jack Engel in and the deal could work. So he's up there. He goes up to as high as 5,900 and he shuts it off. Hey, what'd you shut it off for? He says, we're worried about the rods in this thing. Hell, you weren't worried about rods before. You wanted more RPM. And like a fool, I left my cam. I should have said, give me my cam back. But I left it there. And a month went by, and Ford had a new cam. There's two new. Ford has a new cam for the FE Ford, NASCAR, and also Engel has a new cam for that. And we buy one, and it's our cam. So that, I think we call it an 86ers, but I'm not sure what number it is now. So that's what happened. So if you ever get in on one of these dyno tests, have something written down on what's fair and all that too. Because otherwise you'll get gypped and you won't get the credit you deserve sometimes. All right. Now I got to that's some other good stories. What do you? Talk louder. Is he here? Oh, okay.
Yes, visit.
All right, well, maybe George Montgomery is here. What time is it?
The legendary George Montgomery.
We have a
coming in.
engine builder extraordinaire. Just before he talks,
Questions?
we have open mic for you. George. By the way, one time, engine builders. Now, engineers and sheepskins, I call this. In the old days, the engineers, there wasn't any paper to write your diploma on, so they used a piece of sheepskin, and that was your diploma. You put it up on the wall. Well, who had a sheepskin? Cliff Collins had the sheepskin, and he went together with Kenny Harmon, a boat racing guy, pretty valuable guy, and they started Harmon and Collins after the war and did very good on flathead cams and other cams too. And Cliff Collins used to talk with Keith Black and give him ideas in engineering. And he knew about diesel engines that are slow speed, and the camshaft with rotor tappets are ground with a small wheel, either a 4 or 8 inch, and they have hollow flanks, and that gives you fast opening action for low RPM. Not good for high RPM. And it would give you more area under the lip first because it's flipping the valve open, sort of. Not the cam rotation opens the valve, but it also flips open the valve. I guess it's called. So they decided now that these new overhead valve rotor cams are a hot setup, everything we make will be re-entrant or fast action rotor cams. Well, they're starting a new class of E-boat racing, flat bottom, something like the Cracker Box class. And they're using 390 Chryslers, and Keith Black is building 4 or 5 of these engines right now for this new class. And he's going to use all Harman and he uses all Harman and Collins cams. That's his engineer friend over there. By the way, how did Kenny Harman learn the business? By golly, here, look here. Winfield told me, we started to talk about George Riley, who made those 4-port Riley cylinder heads. And I asked Winfield, hey, did George Riley, we thought that 4-port Riley was the hot setup for a Model B Ford racing engine, 4-cylinder. Pretty practical. Had the breathing of 2 valves, and forget about the exhaust. It's getting out with 1 valve, even with a tortuous passage. Doesn't matter. Did he ever consult with you before he built those 2-port Riley and later that 4-port Riley? Yeah, he did. He did? What did you tell him? I told him to go ahead and build it. What's he up to? What's Winfield up to? Evidently he's just, he wants to see what it'll do, because he's doing real good with flatheads at this time. I says, well, what happened when he got it running? Well, he parked it in front of my shop in a Model A Roadster. Oh, he did? Then what? He's let me take it around the block. Oh, what'd you think of it? Wasn't as good as my flathead. And it must have been the old 2-port. And then he mentioned that when he made the 4-port, he made the ports too big. It had a big flat spot. And he had to reduce the size of those intake ports. All right. So Kenny, and then finally Winfield tells Roddy, you're coming so often to use my machine. I'm too busy using, I'm letting you use my machine. You ought to build your own machine. That wouldn't be hard for you. You build engines and all kinds of stuff. You're a mechanical engineer. So who do you think went to work for George Riley? Kenny Harman worked over there. Now he's got the experience to go with Cliff Collins. And so anyway, we had an old friend named Baker. No, his name was Baker. He was a baker, but his real name was, I can't think of it now. And he liked my flathead cam and his Cracker Box boat. And now he wants to go to this new E-boat that's coming out. And he wants Keith Black to build him an engine too. But he says, you only use the Harman and Collins cams, and I want to use the Iskenderian cam. Oh, if you use an Iskenderian cam, I won't build your engine. So he walks away, and Keith Black thinks it over. Wait a minute. All right, bring the damn cam, and I'll build your engine. They all show up at Marine Stadium, about 6 boats, and one runs away from all the others. It revs way up, and now I didn't realize that Keith Black is in trouble. Those flight customers want to know, what did you do to his engine you did to ours? So he's in my shop wants to buy 5 more rotor cams, just like Hanson. Was it Hanson? No. And so I get them ready for him. And by the way, I know you give Edelbrock an extra 5% because of his volume, but we're going all over the world. We're going to go real big for you. And so I'm thinking of going to your camps now because of this lesson he just learned. And this is a good idea of how a cab grinder can, engine builder can sometimes go to sleep. I call it going to sleep. So I want that extra 5%. All I said is, no, you can't get that kind of volume. And I could have given it to him, and I should have, because I lost a lot of money because he went to England instead afterwards. And he was faithful to him ever since. So, and here's another example. Another great engine builder is up in Salinas, California. What's his name? Can you think of him? He even worked on Novice in the old days with Marshnack and stuff, with the Frenchman Marshnack on the Novice. His name is right on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, he calls one day, I want 10 rotor cams, this a 660, 600. Oh, good, okay. How come you want so many of those? Well, we're rebuilding, finishing up one of Dan Gurney's Indy engines, Chevys, and after we had about 25 horsepower we never saw before. And we traced it down to the cam. So we want 10 of these cams. I said, yeah, that's the one we made for Dan Gurney. In fact, we were developing the cams for him while he was practicing at Indy. He'd already qualified. And he had an engine on the dyno in Santa Ana, and we were jockeying things around, see if we could even get more horsepower before the race started. And so that's it gives you an idea that some kind of a cam grinder or a engine builder can go to sleep, not keeping up with times. Dean Moon one day, he bought Chuck Putman's cam grinder when he retired. And he got his best man with him, the guy that runs the cam grinder. How did he get a job there? Because he didn't want to hire anybody. But this fella come over there and parked in front and ran into it, did damage to his building. That's what made him get a job. He had to work there to work that off. But he became the best cam grinder he had. And he went, when he sold the Dean Moon, and he still was there. And the Dean Moon thinks he's got the best cam for a small block Chevy there is, best cam in the world. So he calls up, gosh, I almost said his name. The famous cam grinder in Ryan Falconer, yeah. You know, the bird that catches other birds. He calls out Faulkner and says, I've got the best cam in the world for the small block Chevy. And says, well, send it up and we'll try it out for you. And he sends it back in 2 weeks. Hey, how come you sent the cam back? Well, he says, that cam is exactly 50 horsepower less than the cam we're using. Oh, that can't be. Why don't you send me that cam you're using? And he says, are you kidding? So these are some of the funny things that happen. Well, there you are. Now, the gas wars and the Atlantic series, you built all those other B6 Buicks?
No, that was the Indy Light series.
Indy Light series, oh yeah, that's right.
You could tell, I'll never match this old man's stories here. But you know, I got a little one kind of the other way around. Back in the early
You
days.
might have to get a little closer.
Is this, are we all right? Your days, you know, if Cam Grinder or company or whoever it was your sponsor, he gave you products free. That was a biggie. Of course, I've been with this old man. Great guy, took good care of me. I was winning and doing well. Harvard Crane called me one day. He says, George, I'd like to give him my product. I give you products at $2,000.
I thought it was only 500.
No. No, $2,000. So I call in. Hey, remember, he's my buddy.
Yeah.
I tell him, he's, I'm going to pick up my pants.
It hurt my feelings. We've got a guy that's already going fast, and if a campground wants to get in on the top level, it's easier to buy your way in, and so forth. And it hurt my feelings a little bit, because I thought it was only $500, and I should have paid it too. Because I heard that Crane offered him $500 a year to run for him, but you say it's $2,000.
$2,000 was done.
Anyway, I thought, well, maybe I can make some hay out of this. I'll put it in the paper and show that Crane has to buy into a successful car. But I never did do that.
Hey, you know what? He
I
said
should have paid him. He made Crane a lot of money.
Yes, he did.
And
But
maybe
anyway,
competition.
I went with Crane reluctantly because, hey, I didn't have any money back then, but this was the start of where some of the manufacturers paid us. But anyway, the man later on, I talked to him, he said, worst decision he ever made.
Yeah, that's right. That was a bad decision to make.
And I did ask his permission to say this in front of you people.
After all, it was,
But he did say that he didn't want to advertise because he didn't want to take the possibility of hurting my feelings somewhere. I love this man. He's a good guy, and we've remained good friends. Of course, then when I went on with the Indy Lights, we used all these products in those engines that I built.
yeah, on that.
I built 100 engines for the Indy Lights series from
You know, I'm
86 to 2000.
I'm curious, did some of those engines sneak up and have a little extra power that you didn't ordinarily get?
I remember now, Buick kept tabs of, even when you ground the cabs, Buick sent you, the GM sent you the specs to grind to.
Yeah.
This was a spec engine. It was the first engine the teams could not own at that time. We're doing a spec series for IndyCar. And the teams was to lease them only, and it was guaranteed, first time ever a racing engine guaranteed for three races or 1,000 miles. There's a lot of pressure on me because I got Buick over here saying we want no engine failures. They're all on TV. So everything we had to do had to be, but we did have a lot of safety margin, computer controlled then, engines were sealed, RPM limiters on them. We run them retarded timing. We run them rich. We cut the horsepower down. Instead of being 450, we cut them to 425. And really, if they get oil and water in them, you couldn't hurt one. And I got a trophy on my wall at home, a gold-plated torque wrench from Buick General Motors for 100 races with no engine failures, which was quite a accomplishment. Yeah.
You know what, I'd like to have you.
And this is with a lot of their products. Camshafts, valve springs, lifters. I used them by the thousands. And he had to give me a deal because I made it.
You know what I like to tell about how I lucked out or stumbled onto something without really knowing what I'm doing. And maybe some of the fellows out there would like to get into business for themselves so I'd like to give them a little encouragement to get started with their own business. Maybe you could tell, like I do, how I stumbled onto something without really knowing what I'm doing and surprised myself or learned something accidentally. Did you ever have anything surprise you?
I think that's going all through life. Today, of course, I have the oldest speed shop in the U.S. Been in business in 1950. Even though it's Speedy Bill, the Speedy Motorsports said he was the oldest, he started in 52. And I love that man, he's a good guy. And I complained to him, I said, "No, you're not the oldest." He said, "Yeah, but I trademarked the name." But anyway, neither here nor there.
Well, I'm curious to know how you started and what kind of engine you were starting to work on.
Well, of course, in my beginning, I worked for GM. I served at toolmakers apprenticeship at Delaware Power State, Ohio. So I worked for GM for 16 years.
Was the factory near your house?
Yeah, it wasn't too far away.
Yeah.
And I know my boss, he had to go check in, and sometimes he'd be a minute late, and he said, "Why do you always come in at the last minute? Come in." But I was working there, and in the tool room, this is different. If day shift is happy, everything goes well. Night shift is fine. I did work night shifts. And my co-workers would race hell with me. Said, "George, you make us look bad. You work all night long." But most was on my race car stuff. My boss, when I came out, he was a good guy. Of course, when you're a tool maker, the machinists are all doing work for me. He came out one night and he said, "George, you got half the tool working in your damn race cars." But he was a good guy. We got our work done, but yeah, I had a lot of stuff. I learned a lot from being around with the people. And yes, I did have an early speed shop. And it's different today. The little mom and pop stores can't survive with the jigs that someone's. But thankfully, racing was good to me. And I don't really have to work. But anyway, I'm still trying to be there every day. Not as old as this little God, but I will be 87 next month.
Oh, yeah.
And you're what now?
98. Yeah.
Oh boy, God bless him.
Well, tell me something. Was that the engine department you were working in?
No, that was the tool room of General Motors, where we was mainly wasn't doing so much production stuff, but just making the tools for
For production.
For production, yeah.
Yeah.
At that time, Delco was making shock absorbers, which they made some trick shock absorbers for my race cars. And some of the engineers there, good people that helped me through my racing career with some really, really trick. In fact, some that got me thrown out, NHRA threw me out in 1960. I coached the Nationals with these coilover shocks, which at that time, nobody ever heard of them. So they disqualified me. So I had to call back, didn't have faxes in those days, had to get GM to send me a telegram saying those are experimental, take apart stuff for possible future stuff. And NHRA did accept it. And I went on to win that race, won the Little Eliminator in 1960. But yeah, I had a lot of interesting stuff. And if I had help from the manufacturers, yes, I supported myself and surrounded myself with some good people And when I got with Ford, party was over. I was badass. My Willys was the first dream car ever to go to wind tunnel. We tried to figure out why it was such an evil handling car. And we found out it at 125, it had 650-pound lift in the back end. The tires are spinning. And I'm lucky to be alive today driving that evil handling thing. And we learned some stuff to do to put on. And NHRA wouldn't allow it, because they were supposed to be stock automobiles that were racing, which of course come on to be today's funny cars. But anyway, I'm telling stories, not necessarily on your cams, but kind of a little bit on my stories. But anyway, Iskenderian has been a big part of it. I'm not a cam engineer designer, but his men and his group are, they do good work.
Why don't you fellows tell us your experience with that single overhead cam?
Well,
Did you?
yes, I had that. Of course, that was one that went with Harvey. But anyway, nothing against that. But the manufacturers had been wanting me to come join them. I didn't realize any of the manufacturers was watching some of the drag racers. And the more successful ones, they wanted me to go join them. Chrysler bugged me. A guy named Dick Maxwell there, Chrysler, good guy. He kept calling me, want me to join their camp. I says, no. I said, back in the cam wars, a lot of you people are gonna be too young to remember we had the cam wars where the West Coast hated anybody. They thought they owned drag racing. And I told him, I said, don't most of the West Coast guys run Chrysler? He said, oh yeah. I said, put me 180 from them. I said, I'm not gonna run a Chrysler. So he was a good guy on that. But anyway, Ford bugged me, and I did go with Ford. They wanted to give me a 289. I said, no, I want the camera. And this is the time when it was more in the talking stage than there yet. In fact, I got beat at the Nationals. I had go to the Nationals every year, and I won every year. And I got beat, and I was devastated. That was in 1965. So I called them when I got back, said, I'm ready to join. 289, I said, no. Camera, SOHC. Oh, I don't have it. I said, that's the only thing I'm. She said, the best I can do is send you parts as we were making them. And Connie Kletter and I were the first to have them. But they kind of sent me parts as they got them done. Didn't get the construction book to put together for a year later, but anyway, that engine was badass. Back to it, we had one on your dyno out there, and Bones was there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot that. We ran your engine on our
No,
dyno?
it was one that I had built for a fellow that I was with there.
Oh, yeah.
But mine was about 100 over his.
100 what?
100 over his.
Oh, yeah.
It was a customer of mine. I got some church stuff in mine, but the camera wasn't paying attention. A lot of RPM, a lot of everything. But did I get his help on it? Yeah. He still gave me help, even though I wasn't necessarily in his camp. He was, that's what I say, we remained friends through my career. But the camera was bad and very dominant. And that was the one I said, now we got the Willys up where it's a pure animal drive.
You guys want to see that car? It's downstairs.
No, not that car.
Not that car, the other one.
That was one of the funny cars that were later.
Right, not the.
The Willys today is in the Henry Ford Museum.
Mustang.
Yeah.
How advanced all the stuff on it was just.
But,
you guys want to see it, it's downstairs.
Anyway, I almost forgot where I'm at. Okay, anyway, we, at first they didn't know what to do with me when Ford went with Ford. Here I got a Willys, and what are they gonna do that with me and the Ford? So they really put me in the Lincoln Mercury group with Al Turner. And Al Turner was a good guy. And I remember at the time, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself too much here, but We was up there at one of the meetings, we had Ford Worldwide Racing, one big meeting for all the Ford racers. And I forget the guy's name who was head of Ford racing stuff, but he said, we're one big happy family there. We're out to beat GM and Chrysler. So then we kind of split off with a group with Al Turner and Lincoln Mercury. And he says, I piss on them, we're out to beat Ford too. He said, and Al's story on that was, he said, we get 2% or 10% of the racing budget. He said, we do 90% of the winning. Of course, over in that group, I'm with Nicholson, Sharpman, Chrisman, and myself. And we went just out of even some of the Ford guys. We thought they were a bunch of playboys. But anyway, irregardless, I did it with a good group, and I'm glad I kind of started with them. When I did get with the Mustang, I was still very friendly with Al Turner and Lincoln Mercury, who was with Logie and kind of come out with some of the first funny cars. So I have a lot of good stuff, a lot of help. And as I say, when I got over with Ford, I got a lot of help, no money, but a lot of engineering, parts, and stuff like that. But then Ford insisted they want us to run their latest engine, was now the Boss 429. But boy, what a pig that was for drag racing. We tried, and they keep insisting. They want us to take our cameras out to put that piece of crap in, and I couldn't get one to work either. But they're insistent, we've got to use the 429. So they assigned to me one of the Ford engineers, Danny Jones was his name, he was an IndyCar. He said, let's make this engine think it's 2 4-cylinder Hawkeys. Remember, there were no computers back then. We're this in the early 70s. No computers. Got into mechanical, so we're going to make this Boss 429 think it's 2 4-cylinder Hawkeys. So I did get engineers from Switzer who made turbochargers, Ford, and we were doing the dyno work then at Patrick Racing in Indianapolis. Went over with the Boss engine was about 900 horsepower, best I could get one. My cameras were about 1,000. So, the first engine we put together with this new turbo package, 1,800. So I thought, boy, we hit a home run, we're ready. So they put the car on the track, the turbo lag was such that all it is was a pig, then just exploded in uncontrollable horsepower. Didn't work. Of course, Switzer, who's helping us now, who builds turbos for trucks, buses, tractors, boats, time was never in their vocabulary. So he said, wow, this is a whole new ball game. So one of the good engineers says, you know what? I'm going to give you a very inefficient turbo to try to get some of the lag out so we get stuff started early. So they finally put another package together, 1,200 horsepower, which, I mean, still 300 above where it was at. So they put in the car, boy, that was dynamite. Had to be careful now. Remember, I got NHR to contend with. And they let me win 2 races. And of course, they got wind of me killing all this horsepower, so they thought I was just playing games with them. So they said, don't bring it back no more. So that was devastating to me. And I was pretty well going to quit drag racing, and I pretty well did for a while. And like the car that's downstairs is a twin turbocharged funny car that they never accepted. Because I'm not trying to toot my horn, but I was too far ahead of their brain power. They didn't know what to do with me, how to factor me on some of the stuff I had. But anyway, this is getting away from me. This guy a little bit, but he's still been, and it was shortly thereafter I got the Indy Lights job. And I did that for 16 years. And my cars are all in good places that I hit. They're either The blue 67 Mustang I had is in. Well, there's another little story on that, but I'll back up a little bit. One time, this is when the car was up there for the wind tunnel. And this was another time they was having a motorsport banquet. My Willys was the centerpiece. Nice car. My cars were always very nice. Always won best engineer. But anyway, I was introduced to Vice President Ford. I think his name was Mr. Fry. He looked at me and he says, "Nice car, but don't we build Fords?" So Charlie Gray was my Ford, and I said, "Me, like a 44?" He says, "No." He said, "Like something like what we sell today." I said, "Like what?" He says, "Mustang." I said, "I don't even know if I can make that meet the rules." He said, "That's your problem." So I talked to Farmer Desmond. He was the head of NHRA Tech at that time. Because the rule says it's got to be automotive frame. Of course, Mustang don't have a frame. So I said, "Will you let me take 2 Willys frame rails and put it under a Mustang?" He said, "I see no reason why not." So I asked Farmer, I said, "Will you help me through this project?" I said, "Keep it quiet, I don't want nobody to know I'm doing this." This was in early '66. So he kind of helped me through. If I got to a stumbling block, if we got to a stumbling block, he would help me through that. So first race I got it done for was Bristol, Tennessee Spring Nationals in '66. I come up with an inspection, they say, "What in the world is this?" I said, "ABS supercharger." He said, "There's no way." I said, "You better go talk to him upstairs, he know all about it." He was gone for about an hour, come back. The rest was history. And I never drove the Willys again. That drove like a Rolls Royce and was a second faster than anybody else. So I had to be very careful not to show my hand. That was probably the best engineered car in Great Racing at that time. And did that change stuff? Yes, it did. In fact, at that meet, I won my class, and then you run the eliminators. The car I was running was a dragster style that I was going to have a second head start. NHRA screwed up and didn't put the handicap in the tree. It was heads up. I'm supposed to have a second head start. And I looked over and said, "Boy, he caught me quick," and I didn't realize what was going on. But anyway, I beat him anyway.
Later, we're on a meeting.
I beat the car anyway. So as far as I'm concerned, that should be a rerun. It was their mistake. They said, "No, I run too damn fast, too far under the record." I was out. And that was really the first time I'd run that car that I really hadn't got it work, but that car was bad. And, but again, I'm not trying to take all the credit myself, but the combination of people that helped me, I had the best. And I went on to have quite a career, and a lot of it is too far ahead of some of the NHRA. They didn't know what to do with me because I had it so far advanced. And today they admit some of the turbocharged stuff, all I was 30 years ahead of their pro model today. But they didn't know what to do to factory to try to keep me so I wasn't so dominant. And so I had to be quiet. I don't know, any of you got any questions on anything for either one of us?
Yes, ask the question, maybe. Yeah, anybody want, about those gas boards, did anybody ever get their feelings hurt on those gas boards with these different ads that we made?
Oh, they all got their finish hurt.
Or did
This old man here, he would put ads in. In fact, I used to time promises to back off me. I was trying to be a little modest, and Yeah, that was really interesting, the gas awards they had between Eagle and Iskey and, who all was in those gas award stuff?
Well, I know Howard Johansson, I went to his service after he passed away, and the fellas told me he wasn't really mad at you. He thought this was good for business, all this Cam Moore's business. And throwing digs back and forth, you know. I said, gee, if I would have known that, I would have visited. And we would dream up different scenarios and get him win this week, and next week I'll win, and so on. But it seemed to help in the business, didn't it?
It did.
Yeah.
It did.
And,
I was trying to be more modest about some of the things, but damn, I still want to beat the West Coast guys. And but, you know, I got another little story.
was that a good idea, naming you Ohio George?
I think that
Could have been better.
You know, I think you ought to be the guy to do that, because they didn't want to use direct names because it could have been detrimental. Some of these ads were put in nasty, so rather than using the name, that's where I kind of think where I got the name Ohio George.
It might have been Stonewoods and Cook that
Yeah.
called you Ohio George.
Well, and yeah, Stonewoods and Cook was called Pebble.
It's stuck.
Yeah, Pebble, Pulp, and Chef. Stonewoods and Cook was called Pebble, Pulp, and Chef.
Yeah, that's right, you made
They had
up
different names for it. But anyway, I come on the West Coast. Now again, this is NHRA Winter Nationals. The West Coast guys hated me. But today, NHRA tells you who you run and what. But back then, I was in probably 66. All the hot West Coast guys lined up. So I had to run every single one of their best cars. Now I'm wading through them, beating them one by one by one. I go up to K.S. Pittman. I beat him. Next round, K.S. is in blind again. I said, hey, I just beat him the last run. They said, oh, he said he staged in oil. And Jack Hart said to let him run again. Now, I didn't like that. And Buster Couch came up and told me, he said, George, that he didn't want to get in a pissing contest with Jack Hart, which was high up in the chart. He said, you run KS, and if you lose, you'll get a run again. So anyway, I had to remember that. I had to run KS twice and beat him twice. But the West Coast guys hated me. But and they were tough. Doug Cook was tough. Some of the guys, they really were tough. That was, you know, that was just to me a good time, a good tough time. But I say then when I got with Ford, the party's over. I was able to just move so far ahead of them in advance that we learned, that we all learned, not just, yes, there's funny cars, everything, when they started using wind tunnels more. And that's why you see the wings and stuff on cars today. The wind tunnels, that was expensive, very expensive stuff. And when you hit the factory, you get 100% effort to me. I was badass.
Did you have a name before Ohio George? Did they call you something else before that?
Not really, I think that, and I don't know whether you might have given me that name even. I can't remember who
No, I
gave me
think
that.
it was the Stonewoods and Cook crew.
That could have been, that would have been Engel then.
Yeah, the black guys came up with that name.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, they were good people, but they had, well, of course, we all had egos. But I think their egos was bigger than mine. They were, go to no expense and no whatever. But it was tough. It was tough racing back in those days. Tires were terrible. The tracks were polished rock, and it was nothing like what today's stuff is. It's different. And you know what? I made money racing. The guys today don't. It cost the money that people spend I mean, there'll be two engineers, high-priced engineers for every one of these hot cars. I didn't have that. Some of my early days, I went to the racetrack alone and have to get volunteers to help me unload my car or whatever it was and help me. I had a full-time job. I had to be back to work. I had my speed shop. So I couldn't travel the West Coast. They was always saying I should come out there. I didn't have time to come out there. But I still had some West Coast people that was good to go. This was one of them.
Did you, when you were racing in those Camels, was that the Gold Agency that hired you
Yeah.
to go to the dates?
Ira Litchie.
Huh?
Ira Litchie.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Yeah, the gold agency was.
Every weekend you had a,
Oh, not just a weekend. Sometimes we'd be on a Wednesday, a Friday, a Saturday, Sunday.
oh, yeah.
And then I'd ask him, I said, you ever look at a map when you're booking me to see where I'm gonna be on Saturday night? And then you got me booked 300 miles away for Sunday? I said,
Oh,
come
I
on, look at a map when you book some of this stuff.
Too much traveling, yeah.
Yeah, and of course I got paid well for doing some of that stuff.
I see.
We're different then. Was it dangerous? Yeah, that's why I say I've been lucky to be alive today on some of the tracks that we raced on.
Bad tracks, yeah.
Oh, it was. It was different.
Did you ever walk the track before you raced on it?
Yes, I did.
Oh,
I tried a lot of them. And I go down, I saw some tree branches be out over. They said, oh, you don't go down this far. I said, my cars will go down that far. It was in the stopping area. And yes, sometimes we had to trim branches off and stuff. Yeah, some of the stuff we raced on, we should have known better. It was interesting.
Well, speed equipment was made back here in Midwest. Speed equipment was made, Roof and Roger made Jagersburger, and it was surprising how the speed equipment started here, but the weather was not good for open roasters.
No, yeah.
Everyday use, yeah. So in California,
You raced all
we
year.
had a weather,
Oh, yeah, raced all year.
but the speed equipment was coming from the east here to begin with.
Well, I think it was, I always thought most of them come to the West Coast, maybe I don't know. But the West Coast, you know, there's a lot of it came from a lot of places. And, I do know the West Coast guys had big egos, they wanted to dominate it, racers. I'm talking about the racers, not necessarily the manufacturers.
Let's see, one time McGirt called me and he said, guess who was here? An old race driver, you could tell he'd been in a lot of accidents. His name was R.A. Jagersburger. Wow, that's the guy that made the Rajo heads for Model Ts. Still alive after the war, and now he had a new 6-cylinder Chevrolet head with the regular intake manifold, but above it was on a 45-degree angle, came in a new manifold and a 45-degree angle with another intake manifold, another carburetor. When you want to go faster, you open up the extra intake manifold, something like a 4-barrel is today. And I said, boy, I would have loved to met that man.
Yeah, see, this man knows stories before
Yeah,
my real times.
But then McGirt, Ford's Chevrolet's coming out with a with a V8, and I'm trying to get an engine from my old friend I raced with in the old days, Murray Rose. They used to race in Indianapolis and on the dirt tracks together, and he works at the performance department of Chevrolet. But all I could get was a few parts, couldn't get a whole engine. So So he says, it don't have a rocker shaft. I said, it doesn't have a rocker shaft. What has it got? He says, it's got a stud and a ball. And, well, what's the rocker look like? He says, it looks like a rowboat. I'm coming over there to see this. And that's what the ball said, rock rocks. The first time we saw it. Well, he said, hey, I'm going back to the race in 1955, I guess it was. And I'm going to go to the General Motors building and visit that race driver, Joe, can't remember his name already. And so away we went. He bought a new Chevy V8, and we went to the General Motors building, and who was that race driver's name? I just
Marty Rose?
Huh?
Marty Rose?
Marty Rose. Marty Rose was there, and Marty Rose is telling us these cars are really fast, you know. I said, how do you know they're fast? They haven't been out yet. Oh, we had them. We had the engine in the old model, the year before model. Nothing could take it from a signal, dragging out from signals. Oh, is that right? And we got letters here. People that used to buy new Chevy 6 every year, and they go and they order, and they see it's got the new, this time, why don't you buy a V8 this time? And they weren't a bit interested in performance, not at least a bit. But once they got a taste of that, wow, this is good to feel. It is good to feel the engine accelerate and rev up and perform. So people that weren't interested in racing at all became interested in racing. Yes, that would probably surprise us too. Yeah.
But again, did anybody have any questions on anything you want, either one of us?
George, what was your favorite car?
You know, I'm asked that question a lot. Let's just say my favorite car was whatever I was winning with at the time. was whatever I was winning with at the time.
Oh yeah, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you can't hardly pick. You know, there's a lot of good things. And I don't know if most of you heard, I'm just being inducted into the Motorsports Hall of Fame in March, and I'm proud of that. You know, I thought you kind of forgot about me, but yeah, the Motorsports Hall, that's the top rung. There is none higher. So I feel very proud of that. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'm pretty lucky to be caught up in this and actually be able to make a living from it. And the campground at the time, Winfield was the main cam grinder, and he knew a lot about racing engine and know how to convert a passenger car into a racing engine. He had a lot of knowledge. You know, in the early days when someone went to buy a cam from him, they came back and with something information. That's what'd you learn? It says volumetric efficiency. Wow, that sounds good. What does that mean? And we finally realized filling that cylinder 100% would be 100% volumetric efficiency. And I guess at the time we thought, well, 100% is as far as you can go. But according to Warren Johnson, he claims that 107% volumetric efficiency. I forget what it was, about 110 or more. In other words, a macerated motor sometimes ram a click can bring in.
That's a
Fill
lot.
that single
That's a
lead.
lot, though.
More full, yeah.
But he
By the way, you know, the fuel air ratio on gasoline is about 13-to-1 for full power. And this book I read, I was surprised when this guy says, Yeah, that's by weight, but by volume, the fuel rate ratio is about 8,000 to 1. In other words, like this room here, 1 cubic feet of gasoline and 8,000 cubic feet, I don't know how many this would be the right mixture to disperse into the air.
Well, yeah, that's right.
About 8,000 to 1 by volume, because the air is so light. That's surprising. If you ever get a chance to read this book, Not Much of an Engineer, it tells about this fellow that was kind of an expert on air, and they were studying before World War II, could missiles be sent from mainland Europe to England and back and forth. So he decided to go over and visit Rolls-Royce, where they build the Spitfire engines for the airplane. And they hire him. He says, "You're not much of an engineer, but we got a lot of engineers here, and they can work with you. This will be your office." I never heard of a thing like this. They gave him a little office and said, "Wander around the plant here and see where you're going to fit in." That's the hardest thing they ever did. So he goes to the supercharger department, and he wants to get a drawing of the supercharger. And the guy says, "Sure, here's a whole set of drawings. Would you like to see one?" "Yeah, I've never seen one." My God, he studies it, and he doesn't like the entrance to that single supercharger, the cylindrical supercharger. And he made a little sketch and sent it upstairs, and the engineer said, "Sure, go down to the workshop and have them make that for you. Let's try it." And there was this extra chute on the inlet to the supercharger. The Spitfire went about 4,000 feet higher right away. And they said, "You know, now you're in charge of supercharger." And this same single-stage supercharger was designed by old man Royce himself. And then, now they were being outrun by that MU-109 German plane. And one day the engineers, they got an order. A Lancaster bomber wants to fly at 40,000 feet, pressurized cockpit, like your passenger cars today, passenger planes today. And they said, "Oh yeah, we've got a big blower that'll do that job. It's off an engine we used to build." And they went ahead with that, and it worked, but they only made the prototype and never made production. Of course, the B-29 went ahead with that idea. Well, anyway, then the engineers, why don't we put that big blower ahead of our little blower with an intercooler? And by God, now it was ended up about 12 or 14 inches longer, the whole engine package, and now they could run against that 109, same